Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. David P. Perrodin, and welcome to the Week 2 Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655, Pupil Services and Non-Discrimination with Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. This week begins Monday, January 27th, and concludes on Sunday, February 2nd, 2025. I am opening weeks 2 and 3 simultaneously to provide you with the option to work ahead a little bit if you prefer. Please note that you are still required to respond to the discussion questions for each week and contribute at least 4 substantive posts for both weeks 2 and 3. A recap: a terrific start to class. Check in with your learning teams. There are detailed instructions in the syllabus on how to prepare your plan for Bruce, but there's also a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity you can bring into that approach. So I'm looking forward to reading those in about a month. If you're working for a CISA or a district office position, approach that assignment as if you were working with a district. So as you post things such as your special education populations, consider it without judging it as good or bad. Like that, we tend to do that, right? But we've got to get away from that. It's just data. And Adam did a terrific job in a number of his posts with presenting the data and then unpacking the numbers. What is informing the numbers? That qualitative component. So the numbers are quantitative, qualitative, more interviews, history, context, things like that. So everything goes deeper than a number. And just remember that. It's baseline. You're obtaining information, and then maybe there's going to be some activity that you'll do to hopefully bring a change from baseline, a positive change. And if that doesn't happen, then you'll take a different approach and seek a change from baseline. Also, some of you mentioned increased speech articulation errors. I've seen that also as a speech language pathologist. That really is a result of the pandemic. Being masked knocked down the volume of speech. Certain sounds, L, TH, S, P, B, M, W, frontal sounds are very visual. So when you're not speaking with other peers and adults as much, and you're also masked, you're not developing those sounds. So we have seen an uptick in speech language, particularly with articulation errors that would be developmental. We wouldn't expect these type of frontal errors for students who, for example, are 8 or 10 years old. Beth noted an increase in ADD in her district, and I think that's an area that requires more research. We have become a society of 100-character tweets and 30-second YouTube shorts. And as a nonfiction author, my publisher has also shared that works need to be shorter, and paragraphs need to be shorter, sentences need to be shorter. And that is a shift that they've observed just in the last 10 years. So where I was writing, typically I would be writing a book maybe 250 pages. Now it's really about 200 pages. That's more of a societal change. Questions and reflection from week 1. Thanks for sharing your experiences with outside agencies. Outside agencies provide mental health counseling. They're vital. It's been awesome to have these services come into schools to prevent the barriers from parents having to take a child out of school for a day, drive an hour to services. But we have to be aware of supplanting of services in school if these providers come into the school, and then also that there's congruency between what they're instructing and also what the school is instructing, and background checks, right? So if they have different people coming to the school working with students, that we know that they've been appropriately vetted. Let's continue. Some of you have discovered student or parent handbooks to have readability levels well into the college level. That's a relatively easy and overlooked area to improve upon, and also check for understanding from the students and parents, the end users, right? Does this make sense to you? What's written here about harassment or bullying, for example? And I would always include that in my 5-year Pupil Services Non-Discrimination Report due to the DPI. Some shout outs. Becky talked about sharing her district's disability population breakdown, and then went on to note that the number of 504 plans have also increased in recent years. This rise is correlated with an uptick in diagnoses of depression, anxiety, and other mental health concerns. 22 students have a 504 plan at the middle school where I work. And I want to just add a note about Section 504. So Section 504 substantially changed in 2024. So check with your forms provider and also check with your legal counsel to make sure that your forms and processes are up to date. Here's an example of a new statement specifically for 504 and school-age students. So I'm taking this. Some people with disabilities, including those with visual, auditory, physical, speech, cognitive, language, learning, and neurological disabilities, have difficulty interacting with and understanding some web content and mobile apps. These individuals can benefit from standards that make web content and mobile applications more perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Section 504 adopts accessibility standards for web content and mobile apps that address these issues. So for you, that means things like accessing the internet, apps, virtual classrooms, right? Google Classroom, whatever you might be using, smartboards. So there are a number of new implications from the kind of soft overhaul of Section 504 in the summer of 2024. So again, if you haven't had a training on this, or if your forms haven't changed, it's a good time to inquire about that and say, who's taken a look at this process since last school year? Because again, it is different now, and there are some portions which are substantially different. So again, check with your forms provider, and I would say also check with your legal counsel to make sure that your process and that your forms reflect the most up-to-date legal rendition of 504. So we also have an issue where, so you're talking about increased 504 numbers, and I think that correlates to, or at least it's related to, IDEA being an old piece of legislation. It's 21 years old. There isn't an authorization in sight. When it first was reauthorized 21 years ago, we didn't have smartphones. Gmail had just been introduced, for example. So like a lot of things that we have today just from technology don't come close. And of course, it was pre-pandemic. Deanne wrote about a grant-funded effort to increase families' awareness of drugs in schools and the community and how to mitigate these issues. But she noted that family engagement hasn't been as robust as desired, perhaps due to some parameters of the grant. So yeah, I understand that. I found that food works. Making a spaghetti meal helps to bring people into the building, especially when they can take things with them. But when turnout is low, the bottom line is you need to be talking with the parents and saying, what would bring you to school for a family night? What would it be? Would it be someone presenting on how to maximize use of, your smart devices, or is it about behavior, or what is it? What's going on? So having people tell you, and don't send out surveys, like actually talk to people and say, what might bring you here? And they might not have anything, but they might suggest some things that you haven't even thought about. Adam wrote, if a family comes that already knows what you are presenting and no one else, is it effective, right? So indicating that the people that come to kind of family school connection activities already have a pretty strong connection with the school. So again, if no one knows about a parent or family support night, is it effective? And this has been a struggle the past few years, especially after the pandemic, right? There are a lot of things, Adam, that just kind of went idle during the pandemic. Across courses, I instruct students talk about parent engagement before the pandemic and after the pandemic. At an elementary school in Janesville, for example, a student talked about a very well-attended monthly movie night at the school, family night. And that was idle during the pandemic, and they haven't been able to start it up since then. And part of it is just people are very hesitant to be in large settings. So we kind of have this shift right now, and that might last for a long time. So it's another thing to consider of how do we restart some of these things, or how do we pivot? And I don't know the answer to that, but these are the discussions to have, because some of these things were more or less just extinguished during the pandemic. So I remember a school event where a speaker came in. It was a family night, and it was talking about the psychology of motivation. And the speaker was fun, and it was a pretty concise presentation. And of course, there was food, right? I think there was popcorn. But he was talking about the use of timers. And I think the school had bought in a lot of timers, kind of like this, just like a basic kind of like kitchen timer, and had those available for parents if they wanted to take them home. But what he was talking about were some specific examples of the use of timers in psychology. And I remember explicitly a few that he talked about. One was a country that put a timer on their stoplights, and it was to decrease kind of road rage and accidents, right? So you'd get up to a stoplight, and it would, have 30 seconds, and you'd see the countdown, so you knew when it was going to, get to zero, and then you'd get to yellow and get to green. And that was effective. Statistically, accidents decreased when people knew how long they had to wait. So the same country decided to do that with their green lights, to put countdown timers. And what happened is the accidents went up, because people be driving and look ahead and say, I've only got 7 seconds to get through the intersection. So they'd be speeding through, and there'd be more accidents. So kind of like what you wish for and what you get. He was also talking about color coding and saying, hey, if you have a list of 5 things to do, and you take the first 3 items in red and the last 2 items in blue, people, can kind of see like they've done the majority, 3/5 by getting the red done. But blue is also associated with sleep and kind of with restfulness and conclusion. And he was saying, for a child, if there's chores to do, maybe there's the first 3, they're red, and maybe they're homework related, and the other 2 are other things, and they're more, like getting ready and brushing your teeth and things like that. But just kind of the breaking up of things. And I remember he was talking about how schools can, run meetings and put it together an agenda, right? And the agenda maybe it's numbered 1 through 7 or 1 through 9 or whatever it is. And then you color code it. And so people know as they're progressing through it, right? So they can visually see, we're like halfway through this, we're 3/4 way through this. So it was just really helpful. And it did change some of the things that I did at home. Elisa wrote, our district runs into more of a struggle in regards to athletics having to compete against club sports for student enrollment. For example, the middle school basketball programs often have a low level of participation, or more affluent schools will have an entire team of students who have been in club sports for multiple years. This creates inequity when other less affluent schools have a basketball team of students who are playing organized basketball for the first time. There are attempts to engage the Park and Rec department in providing more opportunities for all students. Yes, and we're seeing that push happen more and more, right? It's changed at the university level. So now there's these NIL agreements and students entering transfer portals, and basically students making a lot of money in some situations to play sports. So with open enrollment in districts, and also the chance to maybe, land one of these deals, has put an emphasis on some parents to make these investments. And I know a few parents who have invested annually, $20,000 into camps and specialized coaching for their children, because they think there's a shot that they might get a scholarship and maybe a name, image, likeness deal. So it's just what we're dealing with. I love your approach of going to Park and Rec. I think that is awesome. Where I live, we have a very robust Park and Rec. And for example, they've really expanded out their Frisbee golf. We have a really nice Frisbee golf public course in town, and that's a whole family sport. So you can do that if you're just in Park and Rec as a student, but you can bring your family along too. So I like that idea. So I'm going to talk about best interest of the child. So, some of you, we have this quandary of how do we act in the best interest of the child? And legally, it's not defined. I wrote about that in School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America. Bagley and Stefkovich also agree there's no consistent definition of best interest of the child. So looking through multiple research studies and court cases, it was all dependent upon the context of the situation. So acting in the best interest is an expectation that you'll you'll do that, right? But if we look at like 50 court cases where best interest is brought up, they each have their own flavor. So also, as we look ahead, you are going to work with your learning team. So I've already noticed some of you have been communicating, which is great. And you're going to be assembling your allergy plan for Bruce. You might have a rock star allergy plan for Bruce, but who is afforded professional discretion to act in the best interest and jab him with an EpiPen?
Ouch.
Could another student administer the EpiPen? As we continue to look ahead to week 2, I am opening, you're like right now, week 2 and week 3 are out there. Yes, I'm opening week 2 and week 3 at the same time, kind of this time only. And the reason is to allow you to work ahead a little bit into week 3 if you want. So the expectations, again, you'll do your week 2 work and your week 3 work, but both modules right now are going to be open at the same time. And then once we get to week 4, I will just continue to open one at a time. But I think this gives you a little bit of an opportunity right now in kind of understanding what your workload is going to be with your SWOT analysis and with your learning team case study to maybe take an opportunity, if you want, to work ahead a little bit. So we're going to arrive at the intersection of disability and discrimination. We'll consider student allergies and how non-discrimination practices apply. We'll become aware of the DPI's resources for safe schools for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. What are your Board of Education policies and school policies to promote awareness and to mitigate discrimination in these areas? We will also examine recent changes to Title IX, its impact on Board of Education policy and school practices. Wisconsin law prohibits any form of discrimination or harassment against students based on their sex and orientation. Some districts have not updated their Title IX policies yet this year. So if you do a quick Google search, you're talking about Title IX in school districts in Wisconsin, you'll see that there's a lot of discussion happening in districts on how they want to shape their policies to match new federal Title IX parameters. And special education pupil services are largely the result of the extent taken. In other words, simply giving teachers access to the IEP at a glance or 504 at a glance is far different than a face-to-face conversation. This is particularly noteworthy as we are now entering an era of long COVID symptoms, right? So we have students being identified with things like foggy thinking, memory issues, things that are more transient, sleep issues. So what does that mean? How do we even define this? And then how are you helping teachers to understand it? And then also the manifestation of student needs and talking with your administration, your board of saying, these needs are presenting different than they did 5 years ago. A number of you shared that in your disability population breakdowns. OHI, for example, was increasing, which OHI is kind of the catch basin for mental health in some cases. And again, if you're OHI, then your district does get flow-through money for that. If you're 504, your district doesn't get anything as far as funding. So just another reason to advocate for a sweeping reauthorization of IDEA to include a mental health category with funding and resources. So everybody, you've been doing an awesome job. Keep posting in class. Again, we have a pretty steady pace through the first 7 weeks of class, but then you hit your research module and things really slow down and you have time to go and to have discussions and apply like what we've covered so far. So you're doing an awesome job. Anything comes up, let me know. Continue to respond to your weekly discussion questions and make your post. I'll let you know if I see anything wonky. So I will send you an email. And again, connect up with your learning team partners right now and start to figure out how you want to communicate and how you want to approach that plan for Bruce. And there are areas within the syllabus, things that I do want you to address. So thank you so much. I'm having a great time getting to know you through your post.